Well, welcome back to the Art of Boat Building. In today's episode, we're going to start getting some planks on this little tender. Now, before I do that, I decided I would go around and really just make sure everything was just the way that it should be. And I discovered one little problem. And the problem is here up at the stem. Now, what I have is this inner stem, and then a full stem will go over the top of that like so. And this stem here is exactly 1.5 inches. So what I've got here is, if I measure from across the flat part of the stem here, what I end up with is 2 inches from the outside of the plank to the outside of the plank. And what I need is for it to be 1.5 inches. So if I move this over to the center line at 3/4, you can see that I need to take off about 1/4 inch off of each one of these and taper that down. So that was the first thing that I discovered. So I need to ferre this down a little tighter. And in doing so, it'll of course will affect station 1 here and station 2. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to trim back station 2 here. Mainly because I don't really need this mold to be all the way out to the planking, because the bulkhead is what the planking will sit on, and that's the most important part that is ferred out. So I'm going to cut that back about 3/4 inch here, where you can see where I've got this pencil line. So once I do that, then I can ferre out the stem, and then station 1 will need to be a little bit more fairing done to it so that there's a nice smooth transition. So that's what I'm going to do next, is to get those things taken care of. Now that I've got that all sorted out, I can get started putting some planks on the boat. All right, so I've got the first strip all set up here. Now, this first strip, none of the stations that are other than the stem and transom will require any gluing. So it won't be until I get up here, probably it looks like maybe the 5th row or something like that, that I'll actually be gluing on some of these bulkheads. Of course, the number 2 station bulkhead, I will be getting that on probably on about the 2nd strip. So I won't really need to put any glue on these center ones. What I'm going to do is put a staple in there. And if you ever, so the reason I'm using staples is that that's what Nick Shotted, who is probably the premier kayak canoe strip planker. And he's written this book about strip planking, and if you're ever going to pick up a book about it, that's the book to get. So anyway, it's just a matter of putting a staple. He suggests starting amidship and then working for an aft. So I've gotten up here at the stem, which is where I'm going to put a little glue on there. I'm going to use Titebond 2 glue, excuse me, mainly because Titebond 2 sets twice as fast as Titebond 3, and it is water resistant. Now it won't matter because it's all going to get epoxy and glass cloth. So put just a little bit of Titebond here, that to glue on to, and I'm going to be using my this nail gun puts plastic nails in, which you've seen me use this before. It's made by Raptor. I'll leave a link in the description on what model this is and so forth. So I also discovered that putting staples in with my pneumatic stapler was a little quicker than the hand stapler. So that's the next thing I'm going to do is this stapled. Also think I probably need to pull a second air hose out here, or this will get really boring. And put this okay. That's the first step. So I discovered that these staples, which the biggest staple that will fit in that staple gun is a 9/16. These are 3/8, so it's really just not enough staple to hold it. So in reading Nick Shotted's book, I realized he's using 1/4" strips instead of 3/8. So the other thing he suggested was to use a drywall screw. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm seeing that it holds it much better. Yeah. Well, after the first day of planking, we got 12 planks on both the port and starboard side of the boat. I say we because my friend and colleague Pat Cahill stopped by and volunteered to help me get started. Pat's a part of my online boat building clinic, which I call Boat Building Bootcamp. If you're interested in being a part of that community, either you're building a boat or you want to build a boat, there's a link in the description and it's right here on the bottom of the screen. So the reason we stopped at 12 was a couple of reasons. First of all, that as we were planking up the side here, each one of these planks got bent more and more in this direction. So at this point, it seemed that it was about the limit of what it wanted to be pushed down. Now, the other side of that is back here at the transom, we can see that we're almost already past the bilge and we nearly have just the flat part of the transom to go here. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start putting the center planks on the bottom of the boat. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to start planking in the center, and if I take a plank here and show you that the plank will go on here like so, and then I'll slowly work my way down, and then I'll start transitioning these pieces into the sides here like so. If we look here in Nick Schotted's book on page 110, you can see he's got several bottom patterns. Now, granted, he's mainly looking at kayaks or canoes, but if we picture that this was broken here with the transom as a dinghy is, and you can see where the bottom planks go perfectly parallel. Now, here's an example of how that will look. You can see where he's tapering those strips into the side planking. Now, before I can plank the bottom of the boat, there is one more issue I need to resolve, and that's up here at the bow of the boat. So the first thing I've done is I've finished fairing out the stem here, and I've cut a notch in here that is the thickness of the plank. So the center plank will sit right down in there and curve with it, and that's what the stem will sit. The outer stem will sit up on top of that once it's clamped on there. Now, one of the issues though is when this is coming in here straight like this, that trying to get this to bend all the way over there is asking an awful lot of this old cedar. So what I've done is devised an idea that I'm going to cut the strips in half. So instead of having a 1-inch strip, I've got a 1/2-inch strip. And I'm going to put several of these right in here like so, and then slowly work that up. And that way, being only a 1/2 inch thick, it's a lot more pliable. And also, you can see that it's a little, sits up a little bit like that. And then I'm also able to push those planks down like that. So I think we're ready to install the first strip. Now, the way that I prepared these strips was first, of course, I went over the table saw and I cut it at that 15-degree angle that the other that they were previously cut at. I then marked off the angle that it was going to meet this bulkhead, and then I took it over to my disc sander and I ground it down to that bevel, and then I used the flat part and set it at a 45-degree angle so that once the piece goes on here, then that 45, the next plank that fits in there, will get locked in a little bit. So the first step here is to get a little glue on it. Put a little pin in this spot. And to keep it in line with the curve this way, I'll put a clamp on. hold it that. So that's it for up here at the bow. Now some of you may have noticed that there is a crack in this one plank here. Now remember that this is all going to get faired out, and then fairing compound, and then there's going to be glass cloth and epoxy resin, not on the outside but also on the inside. So none of this will matter. That will all sand out and fair out. And also all of these drywall screws will be removed before it's glass clothed. So now let's get started looking at the bottom of the boat for this planking. So my first consideration for the center strip is the dagger board trunk here. So I don't want to cover that up. It is exactly 1 inch wide here. I found a strip here that is nice and straight, and if I line that up with the starboard side here, this angle is the proper angle to meet the side planks. So what I need to do is over on this side is to make the same kind of a 15-degree cut here so that it will match over here on the port side. So that's the first thing to do, is to rip this down so that I've got those two angles going the proper direction. Well, I've got this piece all cut now, and I've also cut it to length to meet the fore edge of the dagger board trunk down to the stem here. Now, one of the issues that I think I'm going to have when I line this up is the stiffness of this to lay down on that stem the way that I'd like it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this essentially resaw it in a way down to here so that those two thinner strips should lay down there a lot easier. I'll get this lined up here. Pulls that down really nicely. All right, so the next thing is to get some glue on the bulkheads, and in between this little resaw that I did in there. Well, now that I've got these two next strips on here, the next issue is how they're going to die into this front bow here. So what I need to do is to trim these off, even with these little pieces that I put in there. So I'm going to basically just take a little stick here and line that up with my eye, mark that, and then mark this one. All right, now I'm going to take my little saw and cut those off. Well, that's about all I'm going to be able to get done today. So I think that's about all we're going to get done in this episode. So we'll get finished getting all of the bottom planks on here and get started ferrying out the boat in the next episode. So thanks for watching, and remember, if you're going to make it beautiful.